Hi, I'm Lisa Pittman, and this is my final presentation to our final research project that we were given. I have to confess, this was a challenging project for me, um, with the looking back into how our schools had to rapidly close, and it just brought up a lot of emotional memories. My son and I both have health issues, so it's been a very difficult time. But at the same time, I appreciate challenging myself to push forward and see how we can integrate technology better. What have we learned from the past and moving forward? So let's take a look at our introduction and COVID-19 technology in schools. And again, I want to touch on the rapid shutdown. As we know, in the spring of 2020, schools across the U.S. rapidly closed their doors in order to deter the spread of COVID-19. Many school districts were not prepared for this, mine in particular. And even though we live in an affluent community, and we had Chromebooks, but not for every student, and so forth. So we found that to be a bit of a challenge when it comes to technology inequity, and I referenced that in my next slide of barriers. So educators, such as ourselves, school districts, parents, and students, we faced many barriers, such as technology inequity and digital literacy. We found that some of our students didn't have a Chromebook. I mean, they may have had a smartphone or a device that they had to share with siblings. Maybe they didn't have hotspots, or maybe one sibling had to be in session and at the same time another sibling needed to be in session. So they were struggling with how to balance that within households. Not only was there an inequity in technology, but digital literacy when trying to step students through on how to log in, how to use Zoom. It was difficult. I'm not going to lie. Many school districts, many teachers, educators found that we were becoming IT experts, and so yeah, that was very challenging. So anyhow, so we had the rapid shutdown. We had some barriers that we needed to overcome. So that's mainly the introduction. Let's take a look at section 1, our educational challenges. Again, let's take a look back. It's always pleasant to take a look back. According to Decker, one of the research articles that I found online, trying to stop the spread of the virus, principals, superintendents, and then governors closed schools across the nation in a wave that began in late February of 2020. This rapid closure, it affected approximately 50.8 million of public school students in the United States, in the 4 United States territories and the District of Columbia, according to Decker. So some of the barriers that we all include that occurred for all of us educators is there were many guidelines from CDC, but little guidelines from the federal government. All the states were basically left to interpret and determine what was going to happen from district to district, county to county, state to state, county to county, and then district to district. Again, technology inequity and digital literacy. Not all school districts had access to technology, devices, hotspots, and then if they did have it, many didn't have the same background knowledge with digital literacy, so that was a struggle. Technology, there was not a unified learning management system. Like, what systems were we going to use? How were they going to be implemented? Did each grade band get to pick what LMS they wanted to use, or was it district-wide? What type of video conferencing were we going to use? Some used Zoom, some used Google Meets, which started out as Google Hangouts. What educational programs were we going to use? IXL, how frequently were we using them? Were there other free programs like Khan Academy and whatnot out there to use? Lessons were not universally designed for our students. Some of the barriers were that we were posting things within Google Classroom, which was the learning management system that we used in our school district. However, maybe instructions were in writing and there was no text to speech, or there was no audio, or there was no video. Some had video, some had text. It was just total chaos and trying to figure out. We were just doing everything we could just to maintain contact with our students, which leads me to communication. If a parent in a school district had multiple kids within the district, some teachers were using Class Dojo, some teachers were using Remind, some teachers were using Google Classroom as a way to connect with parents. Some were text messaging because we didn't have a way of connecting with our parents or students. We were just trying any way that we could to connect with our students. We felt that we needed more professional development and accountability. What were the expectations of the teachers? What were the expectations of parents? We were providing schedules. Parents were struggling themselves, like providing food on the table, roof over their head. And then now you want us to make sure our kid is logging in at a set time, attending class. It was just very difficult. It was very hard. Those were some of the barriers I'm sure we all experienced. In section 2, we were addressing the funding and educational loss, which we all experienced. So let's just take a look at our funding issue here. According to Bamforth, in another article that I found online, Governor DeWine directed school districts, this was just in February of last year, to develop a plan to address learning loss due to school closures. And according to Ingalls, DeWine released $2.7 billion from the state's quote-unquote rainy day fund, monies that he originally cut the previous fiscal year. So he had to do a little backtracking, and he knew that school districts needed help to close that educational loss, or what he called the learning loss. Addressing these issues and educational losses using my district in particular, we're using the Spring State testing scores as a guide point to target missed foundational skills. We've also set aside providing intervention for every student to close the academic gap. Now, each grade level gets to determine how that intervention time is going to be used, but we have to use research-based intervention. We have to target areas that students struggled on the Spring State test. We also have put in place committees to research and recommend programs for educators and parents to use. And we also are addressing the communication barrier with our parents and our students, just to prepare for what if we do need to go remote again. What if we need to use blended learning? I mean, right now it's a hot topic. Schools are heading, opening their doors, and this is a good and bad thing. On a personal note, my school district built a new elementary building that I'm in. Well, the building's not ready, so we had to postpone our start date to the end of August, which may not be, in hindsight, a bad thing, because then we'll get to see what the districts around us are doing as far as mask mandate, no mask mandate. It's kind of a hot mess. Anyhow, back to the communication barrier. We need to have one set way how we're communicating with our parents. That's very important. They are already stressed and busy. They need things streamlined to make it easy for them. They need to find it in one location and be able to go from that location and get to their child's classrooms, progress book, what have you. So we are working at removing that barrier. So in section 3, moving forward, I always like to put a positive spin, which, how are we going to address everything that we've discussed in our paper? What programs are we going to use? What am I going to do in the classroom? So I had some note cards in front of me here. So technology and closing that gap, moving forward, very positive. To be better prepared for remote learning or blended learning, these items will be in place in my classroom. And actually, some of the ones that I'm mentioning, it's district-wide for me, where I teach. A learning management system like Google Classroom. And that is a good foundational place for all teachers to start. We are required by our administrators to have Google Classroom set up. We've taken it a step further in my grade band, and we are using Google Site as the one-stop shop for 4th grade. And inside the Google Site, each teacher has a link to their Google Classroom. So the parent just needs to be able to access Google Site, and then that will open up the playground of learning, if you want to look at it that way. Google Site is going to be our go-to place, and then from there can access their Google Classrooms for their students. Also using Google Suites. Not only for instruction for like Google Slides, Google Doc, but using Google Forms for pre and post assessments. We can add text-to-speech feature. We can drop in videos. We can drop in audio. We can drop in illustrations. And so it's very important as we are trying to close this learning loss is to have pre and post assessments on all instruction. Our instruction needs to be, we're using the flipped classroom instruction, making videos, making it UDL format, using like Screencastify, Screencast-O-Matic, uploading it to YouTube. We can put in closed caption. Also collaboration with not only our peers, but within our students. Flipgrid is fantastic. I love it because kids can make videos a lot easier for them than just writing something out. Kahoot for practicing skills and quizzes can be done independently, or when we're in classroom, they can be on teams and play those learning educational games. Programs such IXL and ClassDojo. ClassDojo is more for communication. That I wanted that under communication. It's very important to have that for our parents. IXL is wonderful for differentiation, for intervention. Highly recommend that if you are not always already using it. So we are currently, like I said, this is what is in place at my district. This is what I'm using in my classroom. ClassDojo is twofold: communicating with parents and tracking classroom behavior. I've also pitched with a flipped classroom that we can post our videos that we're teaching in our classroom right into Google Classroom. That way, if students are quarantined or out due to COVID, they're not missing out. It's available. But at the same time, I went back to that accountability component, which was a barrier. What's the accountability for parents? Getting their kids to log in. That's a struggle. I worked for an online school for over 8 years, and that was a major issue. So, we can plan as best as we can, knowing where we were in the past, but, it's very difficult to plan for everything. But if thinking about it, taking what we learned from the past and the barriers and trying to put into place programs, people, just having a guideline will help us be successful should we encounter this again. I've really enjoyed this class. I thank you all so much. Like I said, this was a very moving topic for me because I had such an emotional time in the spring of 2020 when we closed. It's still very challenging as we're making our way back to the classroom. Me, for the first time, I've been remote teaching since 2020, so this is all new and scary territory for me, but I am certainly looking forward to the challenge. I feel this class has helped me become a better teacher, how to think in terms of what's best for my parents and my students, and how can I help them, and how can I help close that learning gap. I look forward to your comments. I wish you all a great fall, and I hope you all stay healthy. Thank you.